I used to think I'd seen it all in this line of work. Nearly 20 years as a police officer, then elected as sheriff of Custer County, a place where folks believe even the grass grows according to HOA regulations. But nothing. Not a single raid. Not a single court trial. Could have prepared me for the day my daughter, Emily, lay dying in her own front yard, with a bullet lodged in her chest. That afternoon, the sun scorched down on Magnolia Hills, a neighborhood proudly advertised as the safest residential area in the state. I was trimming the lawn when I heard a dry, sharp crack, a gunshot, then a scream. I dropped the clippers, my heart falling out of my chest, and sprinted toward the noise. And then I saw her, Emily, 12 years old, born with cerebral palsy, but always smiling like sunshine, was curled up on the concrete driveway, clutching the armrest of her wheelchair. Blood had soaked through the white t-shirt she had proudly picked out that morning. Right in front of me, just a few steps away, stood her, Clarissa Munden, president of the HOA, a woman with eyes like blades and a mouth that never shuts. She stood there, unblinking, a Ruger 380 still smoking in her hand. I dropped to my knees beside Emily, forcing myself not to tremble. "It's okay, baby. Daddy's here. Daddy's right here." I said it for her, but really it was for me, to keep myself from losing my damn mind. My hand pressed down on the wound. The bullet had pierced her left chest, not deep enough to be fatal, but far from harmless. I'd saved plenty of people before, but this time it was my daughter, and never had I felt so helpless. Clarissa opened her mouth. I just meant to scare her. She wouldn't back up." Scare her? With a real gun? A child in a wheelchair? On her own front lawn? I looked up at her, and the look in my eyes, I'd bet money, was the same one that had made hardened criminals shake in the interrogation room. But Clarissa stood there, no remorse, no fear. Only the cold arrogance of someone used to giving orders and never hearing the word no. I wanted to stand, to lunge, to no. First, I had to save Emily. And then I would return, with the full authority of a father and the power of a sheriff. I carried my daughter to the truck, still holding the blood-soaked cloth to her chest. Clarissa shouted after me, "I'll sue you for building that ramp without approval. It's common property." I didn't look back, just the screech of tires and the roar of the engine as I sped out of Magnolia Hills, straight to the county hospital. And in my mind, only one sentence burned. Clarissa Munden just shot the daughter of Sheriff Hank Lawson, and she will pay for it. That morning, I was just a dad, not a sheriff, not a badge, not a man with the weight of a county on his shoulders, just a father who wanted to spend a slow Saturday helping his daughter feel a little more free. The sun was already warming up. The porch, as I dragged out the garden hose and watered the line of geraniums along the railing. Emily was out front too, grinning from ear to ear as she rolled herself up and down the brand new aluminum ramp we'd installed 2 days earlier. "Look, Dad!" she called, throwing her arms up in triumph as she made it up the slight incline and turned herself around at the top. "I didn't even wobble this time," I chuckled, pretending to make a big deal of it. "Well, I'll be. If you keep that up, you're going to be racing up Mount Rushmore before the week's out." She laughed hard enough to snort, and I swear I'd have bottled that sound forever if I could. You don't get many carefree laughs when your kid grows up fighting for every inch of mobility. The ramp wasn't even permanent, just a portable unit I ordered online with reinforced sides and a non-slip surface. It didn't touch the sidewalk, didn't interfere with anything. All it did was help Emily cross the curb from our driveway without needing me to lift her every time. But of course, in HOA land, logic doesn't always win out. I first got the complaint 2 weeks ago. A thin, typed letter in a manila envelope, taped, no, nailed, to my front door. No signature, just from the office of the Magnolia Hills Homeowners Architectural Review Board. Unapproved structural modification visible from the street, it read, violates Article 4, Section 6 of the Community Aesthetic Compliance Guidelines. I read it twice. Then I laughed, tossed it into the recycling bin, and went back to helping Emily practice. But the letters didn't stop. They kept coming. One every 2 days. Each one more aggressive than the last. First, it was about the ramp. Then it was the color of our mailbox. Then it was the flower pots, my flower pots, being too rustic for neighborhood standards. Every single note had the same tone, cold, clipped, superior. Like the words weren't typed by a neighbor, but by a bureaucrat trying to evict someone from their own life. I knew exactly who was behind it. Clarissa Munden. Clarissa had been the HOA president for 4 years. 3 years too long, in my opinion. She walked around the block like she owned the ground we all stood on. Rules, rules, rules. She had one for everything. Lawn height, fence stain, flag size, even the tone of porch lights during winter holidays. But nothing got under her skin, like seeing someone defy her authority. And nothing, I mean nothing, set her off like my daughter's ramp. "It's an eyesore," she'd said once, hands perched on her hips like she was addressing a city council. "This neighborhood has a reputation to uphold." "Yeah," I said. "A reputation for being cruel to kids in wheelchairs, apparently. That didn't go over well." The next day, someone loosened the bolts on the ramp. I found it listing dangerously to one side before Emily rolled onto it. If she had, she could have flipped over and cracked her skull. I tightened every screw, installed locking brackets, and reviewed our security cameras. Of course, the HOA cameras pointed conveniently away from our side of the street. I didn't report it. Not yet. I was hoping, maybe foolishly, that things would cool down, that Clarissa would get bored, that maybe, just maybe, she had a shred of decency left in her. I underestimated her. That morning, I remember the exact moment she appeared at the end of our driveway. Emily was halfway up the ramp, celebrating her progress with little victory noises. I turned off the hose and looked toward the road, and there she was. Clarissa, standing rigid like a sentry, arms folded, mouth twisted into that disapproving smirk she always wore like a badge. Emily waved at her. Clarissa didn't wave back. Instead, she marched straight up the drive, heels clacking, and without even a greeting, she barked, "I gave you 3 notices, Hank. The ramp needs to go. It violates community uniformity. Remove it, or I'll file for forced remediation." I stepped in between her and Emily. "You're trespassing," I said calmly. "This is HOA jurisdiction," she snapped. "No, this is my driveway," she raised her chin. "I am authorized to enforce standards. That structure is offensive to the aesthetic design of Magnolia Hills." My jaw clenched. "That structure is how my daughter gets in and out of the house without having to crawl or wait for help." "You're emotional," she said flatly. "You're letting sentiment cloud compliance. That's why I'm here. I represent the rules." "You represent control," I said. And for a split second, just one flicker in her eyes, I saw it. That rage, that need to dominate. It was never about the ramp, never about aesthetics. This was about power. I wish I could say that was the end of it. But it wasn't. An hour later, the sun would start to set, and a gunshot would echo across our front yard, and my little girl would lie in my arms, bleeding. Clarissa Munden didn't know who she was dealing with, but she was about to find out. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming, not the shooting, not the moment Clarissa Munden raised a gun and fired into my daughter's chest, but everything that led to it. The signs were all there, like cracks forming in a dam, inching toward a flood. And we just kept patching them with duct tape and good intentions. The first real red flag wasn't a letter. It was a visit. 2 weeks before the shooting, I was getting Emily's wheelchair out of the back of my truck when I saw Clarissa standing on our walkway, hands clasped like she was attending a funeral she didn't want to be at. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said in a tone that suggested she absolutely meant to. I didn't say anything. Just unlatched the ramp and helped Emily down. That ramp, she said, gesturing with her chin. It's bold. Have you considered painting it beige? Something more neutral? I didn't realize accessibility came in color palettes, I said flatly. She ignored that. We have a certain look here in Magnolia Hills. Uniformity brings peace. Disruption causes tension. Emily looked up at her. It's just a ramp. It helps me get around. Clarissa offered a smile so thin it might have been carved from ice. And I'm sure you're very brave. But bravery doesn't exempt anyone from standards. She turned and walked away after that. No goodbye, no further comment. But something in her eyes chilled me. It wasn't just disapproval. It was a calculation. Cold, bureaucratic calculation, like she was filing us away as a future problem to resolve. That night I told my wife, Emily's stepmom, Lisa, what had happened. Lisa's a school psychologist, and she said something I'll never forget. Some people don't see kids like Emily as people. They see them as disruptions, reminders of a world they can't control. That kind of mindset, it festers. She was right. The next week, Clarissa doubled down. We started getting HOA violation notices in our mailbox, one after another, printed in bold font, with words like immediate correction required and subject to penalty review. One of them claimed our American flag was too large for front display standards. Another accused Emily's handmade wind. Chimes of creating auditory clutter, wind chimes. A disabled little girl's wind chimes. Every notice came signed not with a name, but the Magnolia Hills Compliance Committee. I checked with the HOA website. There was no such committee. It was just Clarissa hiding behind official-sounding nonsense. I tried calling her. No answer. I tried emailing the HOA general inbox. No reply. I even attended a board meeting, and she conveniently had to step out before I could speak. The worst came a few days before the shooting. A neighbor, Dan Harris, a retired Marine who lived 2 houses down, stopped me while I was jogging. "You need to watch your 6, he said. I slowed down, confused. "What's going on?" "I heard Clarissa talking to some of the board folks," Dan said. "She's planning to file a formal enforcement order, claims you're a risk to the neighborhood." "Because of a wheelchair ramp?" Dan looked around before leaning closer. "She said, and I quote, 'We need to neutralize that situation before it becomes permanent.'" That word, neutralize. It rattled around in my head for days. It's not something people use lightly, not unless they're trained in control or obsessed with it. Lisa urged me to go public. "You're the sheriff," she said. "Use your platform, expose her." But I didn't want to politicize Emily, didn't want to turn our daughter into a symbol. She just wanted to be a kid. I wanted to roll up her ramp, pick flowers, tinker with bird feeders, and smile like the world wasn't built to trip her. So I waited. I filed everything. I took pictures of every note, every dent in the ramp, every new complaint. I even noticed our security camera being tampered with one night, slightly angled away from the driveway. That one scared me more than anything else. But still, I didn't push back publicly. I thought I could reason with her. I thought the system would hold. I thought the lines wouldn't be crossed until that afternoon, when the line didn't just get crossed. It got obliterated. There's something I've learned over the years, something that never showed up in my training at the academy. Evil doesn't always come in black masks or ski hoods. Sometimes it comes with a clipboard and a neighborhood watch badge. Sometimes it wears high heels and a fitted blazer. Sometimes it walks your streets pretending it's protecting order, when really, it's poisoning your peace. Clarissa Munden was that poison, and we ignored the warning signs. We let her fester. We let her build her little empire of fear and rules and control, and when the day came that she couldn't dominate us with words or threats anymore, she pulled the trigger. on a child. My child. It was supposed to be a quiet afternoon. Emily had just finished her physical therapy session at home and asked if she could roll outside for a bit. "Just 5 laps around the driveway," she said, holding up her hand like she was negotiating with the president. I smiled and told her to go ahead while I finished stacking some firewood by the shed. She was halfway through lap 3, her little arms working the wheels like a pro, when I heard footsteps on gravel. Slow, deliberate, heels. Didn't even need to look. I knew who it was, Clarissa Munden. She always made her entrance like a court summons, cold, formal, with an air of authority that didn't match her role as a glorified HOA president. But today, something was different. She wasn't holding her clipboard. No folder, no stack of compliance forms to wave in my face, just her purse slung tight against her body, and a look I hadn't seen before. Resolved. "Mrs. Munden," I said, standing upright and dusting off my hands. "You didn't." "Remove the ramp," she replied. Not a greeting, just an accusation. "I didn't," I said. "And I'm not going to. It's legal, it's temporary, and it's necessary." She walked closer, her face rigid. "This isn't about necessity. This is about rules, Hank. It's about the visual integrity of the community. That ramp is a scar on the neighborhood." I took a step forward, positioning myself between her and Emily. "Emily is 12. She has cerebral palsy. That ramp is how she gets to live like a normal kid." Clarissa's eyes flicked over my shoulder toward Emily, who was now stopped at the base of the ramp, watching us with caution. She didn't say anything, but her hands were clutching her wheels tight. "I warned you," Clarissa said. "I sent letters, notices. You've left me no choice." My chest tightened. "Clarissa," I said slowly, "turn around and walk away." She didn't. Instead, her hand slipped into her purse, and that's when my training kicked in. "Don't," I said, voice low and sharp. "Do not reach into that bag." But she did. She pulled out a compact handgun, a Ruger 380, nickel-plated. I'd seen dozens of them over the years. Easy to carry, easy to conceal. "Dangerous in the wrong hands." "I'm tired of being ignored," she said, her voice rising, breaking its usual icy control. "You people think you can do whatever you want, but there are rules for a reason." "You're holding a gun in front of a child," I growled, stepping between her and my daughter. "You're crossing a line you don't come back from." "It's just to scare you," she snapped, "to remind you who's in charge." Then she raised the gun and pulled the trigger. I didn't even have time to yell. The shot rang out, sharp, cruel, unforgiving. I turned instinctively, and behind me, Emily cried out and collapsed sideways out of her chair. The ramp clattered, wheels spinning in the air as she hit the pavement. Blood bloomed on her chest. The world narrowed to a tunnel. Sound dropped out. All I could hear was my own heart pounding like a war drum as I dropped to my knees and cradled her in my arms. She was conscious, barely. Her eyes were wide with terror, her breath shallow and ragged. Blood soaked through her shirt, warm and wet against my hands. "It's okay, sweetheart, stay with me," I whispered, my voice shaking harder than it ever had in 20 years of law enforcement. "Daddy's here. You're okay. You're gonna be okay." Clarissa stood there, gun still raised, shaking now. "I didn't mean to hit her," she mumbled, like that erased what she'd just done. She moved. I was aiming for you." I looked up at her, cold, dead, controlled. "Drop the weapon," I said, but my tone had changed. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was Sheriff Lawson again. "Drop it, now!" Her hand trembled. The gun clattered to the concrete. I grabbed my phone with one bloody hand and called it in. "This is Sheriff Hank Lawson. Shots fired. Child injured. I need EMTs and backup at 1511 Sycamore Drive. The suspect is armed but disarmed. Secure. The perimeter." Then I hung up, and I looked back at Emily. She was fading. Her lips were pale. Her little hands trembled, reaching for me. "Daddy?" "I'm right here, Em. You're so brave. You're the bravest kid I know." I pressed my jacket against her chest, trying to stop the bleeding. My knees were soaked in her blood. I heard sirens in the distance, fast, approaching. Then came the moment I'll never forget. Emily, half conscious, barely breathing, reached up and touched my cheek. "Did I break a rule?" she whispered. "God." "No, baby," I said, choking back every emotion I'd ever learned to hide. "You didn't break anything. She did." That was the moment everything broke. Not just peace, not just the ramp, but the illusion that some people are just strict or difficult. No. Clarissa Munden wasn't just a stickler for rules. She was a danger, and now the whole world would know it. The back seat of my SUV was never meant to be an ambulance, but that afternoon, it became one. I cradled Emily in my arms. One hand pressed hard against the wound on her chest, the other gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled fury. My siren roared as I tore through stop signs and intersections, a blur of asphalt, red lights, and shocked drivers pulling aside as I screamed past them. "Stay with me, sweetheart. Just hold on." Her head rested in my lap, eyes fluttering. Her lips were pale, breath shallow. Every second felt like a countdown I couldn't stop. When we reached Custer County General, I didn't even park. I pulled straight onto the emergency ramp, tires screeching, yelling for help before the doors even opened. "Gunshot wound! 12-year-old girl! Chest! Left side! In and out!" The ER team swarmed like hornets, pulling her from my arms onto a gurney, voices layered with urgency. "Pulse thread! Type and cross for 2 units. Get surgery on standby." I followed them through the double doors, but a nurse stopped me with a firm hand on my chest. "We've got her, sir. We've got her." I just stood there, hands soaked in my daughter's blood, shirt ripped, chest heaving. Somewhere behind me, one of the staff recognized me. "Is that Sheriff Lawson?" Then the whispers started, then the looks, and I didn't care. Let them see. My daughter was shot by a woman who believed HOA rules mattered more than a child's life, and I wasn't going to let that stand. I stepped outside, pulled out my radio, and switched channels to the sheriff's operations line. "Unit 1 to dispatch. Go ahead, Sheriff. I want a unit at 1511 Sycamore Drive. Secure the scene. The suspect is Clarissa Munden, female, white, mid-50s, discharged a firearm, suspect disarmed but dangerous. Detain her. Take her in." "Copy. That, Unit 1. Units en route." I paused. "Advise responding officers. That's not just a civilian dispute. That's a felony assault with a deadly weapon. On a child. On a disabled minor." Silence for half a beat. Then, "Understood, Sheriff. We'll treat it accordingly." I hung up, paced, then punched the wall. Not hard enough to break bones, but hard enough to feel something. The rage was eating me alive. This wasn't some stranger in a bar. This wasn't a domestic call gone wrong. This was my daughter, on my property, shot by someone I'd warned, myself to stay calm around. And now Emily was in surgery because I'd given Clarissa Munden too much rope. Lisa showed up 15 minutes later, out of breath, red-eyed, hands shaking as she threw herself into my arms. "How bad?" she asked. I didn't lie. "It's bad, but they're working on her. She's tough." Lisa pulled away just enough to look me in the eyes. "Tell me she's in custody." "She will be." Lisa's voice dropped an octave. "Tell me this. Woman is never getting near another family again." I nodded. "I'm making sure of it." 45 minutes later, I got the call from Deputy Keene. "Sheriff, we've secured the scene." Clarissa was still there. She tried to claim it was self-defense. Did she have counsel? She said she didn't need one because she's the president of the HOA. I nearly laughed. Almost. Read her rights, book her, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted manslaughter, possible hate crime charges depending on Emily's condition. Keene hesitated. "You sure you want to lead this, Sheriff? It's your kid. Conflict of interest." "I don't care if it's a conflict of interest," I growled. "That woman shot my daughter over a damn ramp. The kind of people that defend that kind of insanity aren't neighbors. They're terrorists with lawn standards. He exhaled. Understood. She's on her way to county holding now. No bond until arraignment. Good. I ended the call and slumped back onto the hospital bench. Lisa sat beside me. We didn't speak, just stared at the OR doors, waiting for someone in scrubs to come through and tell us whether the rest of our lives were about to be shattered or just forever changed. Eventually, a surgeon came out. She pulled her mask down and gave us a "on." She made it through. The bullet missed the heart by less than an inch. We've stabilized her, but she's in critical care. She'll need time and rehab, but she's alive. Alive. That one word knocked the breath from my lungs. I dropped my head into my hands. I didn't cry, but if Lisa hadn't been holding my shoulder, I might have collapsed from the sheer weight of it all. Alive. But survival wasn't enough. Not this time. Clarissa Munden had aimed to intimidate, and she failed. Then she aimed to harm and nearly succeeded. And now she'd pay. Not just in court. Not just in a prison cell, but in every HOA board hearing, every news article, every conversation in every coffee shop across the state when someone says, "You hear about that woman who shot a disabled kid over a ramp?" Yeah. Turns out her dad was the sheriff. That's the legacy Clarissa earned, and I was just getting started. Clarissa Munden was in handcuffs by 7:03 p.m. It wasn't a clean scene. She didn't go quietly. When my deputies arrived, she stood on her front lawn like a dethroned queen, shouting about bylaws and authority, clutching a folder of laminated HOA guidelines like they could shield her from justice. "I'm the president of this community," she yelled as Keene and Martinez walked her to the cruiser. "You're all making a mistake." She didn't scream because she was afraid. She screamed because the world had finally told her no, and it didn't know how to handle her tantrum. By the time I arrived, the sun was dropping behind the rooftops of Magnolia Hills, painting the neighborhood in that soft golden hue that made it look peaceful. It wasn't. Not anymore. Neighbors had gathered. People I'd nodded to at barbecues, waved to on dog walks, people who never spoke up when Clarissa left her little threats on their porches or fined them for wind chimes that clashed with seasonal decor. They were watching now, murmuring behind sunglasses, wondering if the world they'd comfortably ignored had just punched them in the face. I stepped out of my truck, still in the blood-stained clothes I wore when I carried my daughter into the ER. That wasn't a mistake. Let them see it. Let them feel it. Clarissa locked eyes with me as they loaded her into the squad car. "You can't do this to me," she hissed. "This is retaliation. You're violating protocol." "I'm enforcing the law," I said. "You violated a child's chest," she snarled. "You'll regret this. I'll sue. I'll dismantle your entire department." "You couldn't even dismantle a $300 aluminum ramp," I said. The door slammed shut. Keene nodded at me from the driver's side. "We'll take it from here, Sheriff." Back at the station, I personally reviewed the arrest file. I attached every security camera clip we had, though conveniently, Clarissa's own HOA-approved street camera had malfunctioned during the incident. It didn't matter. We had witnesses, forensics, and most damning of all, her own words. I just wanted to scare them. "She moved. I was aiming for you." We pulled those lines straight from a deputy's body cam. Intent, motive, recklessness, malice, perfect cocktail of self-destruction. And the charges? We didn't hold back. Attempted murder, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, reckless endangerment of a minor, use of a firearm in commission of a felony, hate crime enhancements. Some of my younger deputies stared at the stack of paperwork in silence. One of them asked, "She really thought she could get away with it?" "She did," I said. "That's the problem, and that's why we're going to make sure she doesn't." That night, the phone started ringing. Local news stations caught wind. HOA president arrested for shooting disabled child. That headline ran on 3 channels before midnight. By morning, it was on national feeds, CNN, Fox, local blogs, HOA watchdog forums. One Reddit thread had 500,000 views in 4 hours. But the real fallout? Right here in Magnolia Hills. The next morning, I drove through the neighborhood in an unmarked cruiser. Not to surveil, just to watch. I saw signs come down. Those little plastic HOA-approved plaques with community pride and award-winning yard quietly removed from lawns. Neighbors who'd once stood on the sidelines now whispering on sidewalks, exchanging guilt-ridden glances like co-conspirators waking from a dream. Dan Harris, the retired Marine from 2 houses down, was outside cleaning his grill. He gave me a slow, solemn nod. "I should have done more," he said. "You tried," I told him. "You warned me." Not loud enough. I didn't argue. Then I passed Lot 112, the Jenkins family. Their youngest daughter, Hannah, used a walker. They'd once tried to build a ramp too, but it violated slope aesthetics, according to Clarissa's letters. They tore it down before the board could find them. That morning, Mr. Jenkins was outside with a drill, reattaching the old ramp in broad daylight. When he saw me driving past, he didn't hide it. He raised the drill in the air like a salute. I nodded back. By the time Clarissa sat in her first arraignment hearing, the courtroom was packed. Press, community members, a dozen HOA residents who'd once been too afraid to speak now lined the benches like witnesses at an exorcism. She showed up in an orange jumpsuit, still trying to wear her usual lipstick. But nothing could fix what she'd become. A symbol of power gone feral. She pleaded not guilty. Claimed it was an accident. Claimed I was biased. Didn't matter. The judge denied bail. Given the severity of the offense, he said, and the apparent premeditated hostility toward the victim, the court finds you a danger to the community. Clarissa gasped. Her attorney whispered frantically. I didn't smile, but I felt something settle in my chest that had been twisted for days. Not relief, not triumph, just justice. Beginning to take root. Some folks say this kind of story breaks neighborhoods. I say it reveals them. Magnolia Hills used to be a place where you couldn't paint your mailbox without permission. Now, it was becoming a place where people finally asked who was giving that permission and why. And while Emily lay in recovery, one question hung heavy over every porch and picket fence in town. How long had we let one woman's obsession with control endanger us all? Before someone bled for it? It started with a phone call from Internal Affairs. I was standing outside Emily's hospital room, sipping lukewarm coffee, when my phone buzzed. The voice on the other end was clipped and direct. Sheriff Lawson, this is Agent Harper with the State Regulatory Oversight Office. We've been reviewing the HOA compliance filings for Magnolia Hills. You may want to sit down. I didn't sit. Go ahead, I said. What we're seeing doesn't add up. Your HOA president, Clarissa Munden, she's been signing off on enforcement letters, fines, and legal warnings under the name of an architectural review committee that doesn't exist in your community charter. I let that sink in. That's not all, she continued. She's collected over $62,000 in fines over the last 18 months. Not a cent of it is reported in tax documents. Not one transaction logged with your HOA's registered treasurer. She's been pocketing it, I said. Or laundering it, Agent Harper replied. But either way, it's illegal. I looked through the glass into Emily's room. She was asleep, a soft beeping tracking her heartbeat. A line of stuffed owls lined the windowsill. Lisa was sitting beside her, reading a book she wasn't really reading. Send me what you've got, I said. I'll bring it from the inside. Over the next 48 hours, my department, and a few trusted folks from the state, pulled every HOA record from the last 5 years. What we found? Clarissa Munden hadn't just broken the law the day she pulled the trigger. She'd been running her HOA like a private dictatorship for years. Fake committees, phony bylaw amendments, intimidation letters signed with ghost names. Even a compliance enforcement team, she claimed, was made up of appointed citizens. Turns out it was just her nephew and her dog Walker, both paid under the table to slap warning stickers on mailboxes. The paper trail was a mess of arrogance and fraud. One file hit especially hard. Case ID, Borough 1921A, ramp request denied, Jenkins. Family. Reason: wheelchair access is not a justification for visual disruption. Attached was a photo. Hannah Jenkins, maybe 8 years old at the time, holding her walker, looking confused while standing in front of a newly removed plywood ramp. That's when it hit me. Clarissa didn't snap the day she shot Emily. She'd been snapping for years. Quietly, behind forms and fake stamps. She didn't see families. She saw threats to her perfect little fantasy. The only thing that changed was that my daughter survived long enough to pull back the curtain. I called an emergency HOA general meeting. It was the first one that had ever been truly open. No RSVP cards, no gatekeeping. Just a room packed full of angry neighbors, a big projector screen, and me standing at the front in my sheriff's uniform, holding a folder labeled Evidence. The silence when I entered could have frozen time. I started slow, calm, but clear. For years, you were told what to plant, what to paint, and what was acceptable based on one woman's idea of perfection, and when you questioned it, you got letters, threats, fines. I clicked the first slide, a scanned copy of a fake fine issued to an elderly couple for hanging prayer flags. Next slide, $500 fine to a veteran for placing a bench too close to his lawn edge. Then came the bombshell, a spreadsheet showing $62,143 in unreported fines and enforcement fees, all traced to an account linked directly to Clarissa Munden. Gasps, murmurs, a few audible curses. One man, Mr. Jennings, stood up, red in the face. She fined my wife $300 for putting up a wine spinner. I called it distracting to traffic. And we paid for it. You weren't alone, I said. I showed them the full list. Over 140 families. Some were fined once, some were fined 10 times. All under the illusion that it was required. And then, I said, voice steady, when I stood up for my daughter, when I refused to remove a ramp that helped her live with dignity, Clarissa pulled a gun. I didn't need to show the hospital photo. I didn't need to play the body cam clip. The room already felt like it was breathing fire. By the end of that meeting, a vote was taken. Unanimous. Clarissa Munden was officially stripped of all HOA positions, pending legal prosecution. Fee. Board she built from lies and fear collapsed in a single hour, and for the first time, I saw neighbors who used to whisper now standing up and speaking loud, offering to help each other rebuild, to challenge old rules, to file a full audit of the HOA's finances. A woman approached me afterward, Mrs. Thompson, whose husband was once fined for painting their fence navy instead of HOA-approved beige. She looked at me with tearful eyes and said, "I'm sorry we let it get this far. I thought I was keeping my head down, but I was letting her win." "You're speaking up now," I said. "That's what matters. They say it only takes one crack in a wall to bring it all down. Clarissa was the wall. Emily was the crack. And now, we were building something stronger in its place." I still remember the moment Emily opened her eyes for the first time after the surgery. She blinked a few times, weakly, then glanced around the room, her dry lips whispering, "Am I alive?" I laughed through tears. "Yeah, you're alive. And you just made the whole state stop in its tracks, kiddo." She tried to smile, her trembling hand clutching my finger. That frail grip was enough for me to know. We had won. Not just a case, but a longer war against indifference, silence, and those who believed regulations mattered more than people. In the following weeks, Emily recovered slowly. Every tiny step was a miracle. She relearned how to breathe deeply, to sit up, and to control her wheelchair again with one shoulder still swollen. The entire town poured into the hospital like a pilgrimage. Some brought flowers, some brought stuffed animals, others just stood at the door to say, "I'm sorry." Old ladies who once sat silently as they were fined for planting the wrong color tulips now clutched Lisa's hand and said, "We understand now. We stayed quiet for too long. I didn't blame them. No one ever imagined the day would come when a HOA Karen would aim a gun at a child's chest." But that day came, and now people were waking up. Clarissa Munden was charged with 5 criminal offenses. Bail was denied. At her arraignment, she no longer had that smug arrogance. Just a woman curled up, dodging cameras, clinging to the same laws she had twisted for years. For me, her downfall brought no pleasure, only silence, because I knew Clarissa was just the tip of the iceberg. How many more HOAs? How many people live under the shadow of invisible committees? How many children had been restricted, denied, just because they didn't meet the aesthetic standard? I received hundreds of calls from other towns, other victims. A wave of accusations spread like wildfire, and then I realized Emily didn't just survive. She had started a revolution. One afternoon, when Emily could sit in her wheelchair again, I took her outside. The ramp was still there, now reinforced with steel, engraved with the words, "Emily's path, a road. No one has the right to tear down." That day, the whole neighborhood lined the street, clapping as Emily rolled up that ramp. Hannah, the little girl who'd been forced to remove her ramp last year, was there too. And for the first time, I saw her step forward. On shaky legs, not afraid of anyone's gaze, Clarissa wasn't there. She was sitting in jail awaiting trial. But her absence was exactly what made that day's air feel fresher than ever. We didn't abolish the HOA. We reformed it. We turned it into something that would protect the community, not control it. We re-elected the board, removed absurd rules, added clauses for disability support. From Magnolia Hills, a name once whispered with unease, it became the leading voice in statewide HOA reform. A month after Clarissa's arrest, I sat Emily on my lap in the backyard, both of us watching the sky. "Dad," she said. "Do you think if I hadn't been shot, all of this would have just kept going?" I stayed quiet for a moment. "Maybe, but because you dared to exist, in your own way," the truth came out. Emily nodded, her eyes shimmering. Not from tears, but from the golden sunset shining directly on her face. Directly, with nothing in its way. "So, did I win?" I squeezed her hand. "No, you're still winning, every day." Clarissa Munden thought she was untouchable, that the HOA rules were hers to write, and anyone who resisted would be punished. But when she pulled the trigger on an innocent child, the entire town woke up. She didn't just lose her authority. She lost her honor, her freedom, and the silence she once ruled over. And Emily, the little girl once deemed an aesthetic obstruction, became the symbol of a community rising, because in Magnolia Hills, people no longer bow to the HOA. They hold their heads high, knowing that justice has been rewritten.